Slavery was a system used by the Europeans to strip Africans of their identity, culture, and humanity. However, many Africans resisted as they wanted to preserve their culture, the thing that they valued. They also wanted to strategize an escape plan. Sadly, in the struggle against slavery and to keep their culture intact, many Africans lost their lives at the hands of Europeans, while others faced inhumane experiences. We can't deny that in this period, Africans lost many things: cultural activities, families, and their way of life. However, not all was lost. Despite the numerous Africanisms that survived the Middle Passage, there was one that held much importance. So what was this? And what impact did it bring? In this video, we will take you through the journey in African history as we look at a game known as Awari. Awari, universally known as Makala, is a game whose existence has been documented as early as 1500 BC. The game existed in multiple forms throughout Africa and Asia. Throughout Africa, it is known by many different names such as Gabata, Owari, Soayo, and others. The word Owari is an Akan word meaning he, she marries. The reason for its meaning was from an Ashanti legend when a woman and a man got married in order to play the game uninterrupted. Owari was also considered a game of royals and was notably played by the king of Ashanti and Dankaya of Ghana until it became accessible to all. Owari is considered one of the oldest Mancala board games in the world. Centuries ago in ancient Africa, specifically in the Ashanti tribe in Ghana, Mancala is one of the most commonly known board games in Africa, among others. The worldwide spread of the game was because of the slave trade that saw many Africans sold to foreign nations. The Africans carried with them the joy of playing Awari and played it in their free time. Awari is a very popular game in the Caribbean to date. It is believed to have been taken by slaves from West Africa and is stuck there. It is played on a board with 12 pits, or houses, as they are referred to, 6 on either side. Some game boards have an extra hole on the opposite side to keep the counters. Counters, for example, are shells, pebbles, and nickernuts, are used to play and fill the houses according to the game. Awari is based on a counting skill with 2 contestants facing each other on the board, which consists of 12 hollows or pits containing 4 horse knickers, seeds as they are commonly known. The object of the game is to simply capture more than 24 of the opponent's seeds. The game's simplicity is deceptive, with the skills and strategy decision-making needed to win. To play competitively requires serious concentration and is a test of one's intelligence. Awari, among other Mancala games, was one of the techniques employed for counting in ancient Africa. Well, in the Caribbean, Awari was not just a game or a sport. When men played, it showed that they collectively engaged in their African roots. Awari traces its origins to a family of pit and pebble Mancala games played by the Kush people over 3,500 years ago in Sudan in the Upper Nile. It came to West Africa during the height of the trans-Saharan trade, and the game spread across the region. Did you also know that the name Wari is derived from the Ijo language of the Niger Delta in Nigeria, which means house? 2 variants of the game came across the Atlantic in the 1600s. There was the Ashanti version, Awari, which was established as Wari or Babo's warrior, and the Yoruba version of the game, Ayo Ayo, which became known as the Round and Round Wari. The rules of these games have been preserved and handed down from generation to generation by word-of-mouth communication. The similarity of the rule for these 2 variants of Wari played in Barbosas suggests the island's culture was strongly influenced by the Ashanti and Yoruba. This could be counted among the island's finest examples of West African heritage. Richard Stoffel argued that when males played Wari, they collectively engaged their African cultures and organized themselves in opposition to the slave plantation or colonial system in Barbados and elsewhere in the Caribbean. Also, in other evidence, it was claimed that the Awari arrived in the Caribbean during the enslavement period. Some data records that the game was associated with the spiritual activities and that the game board itself was sacred. So although apparently innocuous to Europeans, it is argued here that the widely shared cultural meaning of Awari in pre-colonial Africa provide the foundation for new forms of Creole social organizations among enslaved men of African ancestry in the Caribbean. Responding to continuous suppression, this Creole resistance process, based upon the Awari game, began during slavery and continued during the harsh period of English civil domination from the end of slavery in 1834 until the national independence in 1966. In Awari, among the slaves, The counter represented men and the pits represented the various sections of the plantation on which they worked. As they moved the counter from hole to hole, this was a way to communicate the next move and action for the slave, or report the happenings in different sections without saying a word. They used Awori as a way to plan, strategize, and communicate possible escape routes and plans for the future. Wari was treated with contempt by the Europeans and was driven underground. Awori would be repressed thoroughly on the western side of the Atlantic. However, the players would waste no time as they would curve another beautiful Wari board. It wasn't allowed that one would own a decorated board since they were burned and destroyed as soon as they were discovered. Africans used various forms of resistance. Some were more successful than others. Aside from getting outright freedom through revolt, some took piecemeal steps in establishing their own agency. To date, Awori is seen as a way or method to connect spiritually with the ancestors. This game is considered a game of men because of its history. It also contributes to social organization. Awori can become a positive symbol of African ancestry in the contemporary Caribbean. To do so, however, must become socially constructed by joining current heritage debates about other heritage symbols. Awori is documented as having been a foundation for the formation and perpetration of social relationships between men in West Africa itself. Board games such as Awori serve as a social lubricant. They facilitate interaction between different cultures and/or language groups in ways similar to feasting and drinking alcohol. The abstract rows of holes and identical playing counters, as well as the playing rules, do not carry immediately recognizable culture-specific traits. Instead, the game is and has been appropriated by a diverse group of people in both West Africa and the Caribbean. Mapping Awori over the past 100 years is essential because this established that it was played throughout the Caribbean and Africa with the first description of Awori rules. However, in general, people saw Awori as part of an African heritage. Together, these observations documented an argument that African men who were brought into slave plantations in the New World would have known about Awori, valued it as culturally important activity, and engaged in activities centered on the game, some of which were not for the purpose of recreation. Given this context, it may help in understanding why the game survived the Middle Passage and continued to exist in the Caribbean. In order to keep Africans psychologically dependent on the colonial authorities, they had to produce an environment that was alien and new to the Africans, as articulated by Professor Richard Stoffe. Sources say that the game of Awori survived to combat this new environment by creating an atmosphere conducive to social bonding among various African groups who were not familiar with each other's language, culture, and worldview. In general, Awori was a psychological bonding agent to hold values, agency, and identities together. Transferring and establishing African culture elements and experiences to plantation society would mitigate colonial efforts to create a totally alien environment and a psychologically dependent workforce. Some Europeans considered the game harmless and non-worthy of supervision or concern. This led Awori to thrive as a tool to reinforce African agency, according to field research. There were some claims that the game was used to develop escape routes or information gathering on other plantations. This information seems conclusive or satisfactory. However, it is clear that there is more to discover when it comes to understand the resistant efforts of the African people. Awori is still played all over the world by men, women, old and young people as a sport or pastime. In 2009, the Awori tournament in Spain, 810 students participated in the game. Awori has been considered an abstract strategy game. We would love to give you all the details of the Awori game. However, that is all you need to know about the video today. What was most surprising for you? Let us know in the comments section. Remember to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe on your way out.